Wonderful. So we just figured out how firms are going to behave when they're deciding how much output to produce, knowing that their competitors are making the same type of output, and that the price they're going to be able to charge depends not just on how much they make, but also on how much their competitors make. But is that the only way we could imagine competing firms to behave when we have a couple of firms producing the same type of output? No. There's another natural thing to think about, which is what would happen if instead of deciding how much output to produce and then charging the price they're able to charge, firms decided what price to charge for their output and then sold as much as they could at that price. So that's maybe not a very good assumption in a case like the auto industry, because we might think that it takes a lot of time and planning to build a car. Once the cars are built, you're going to have to sell them at the price you can sell them. Might not be a good assumption if we're thinking about potatoes or beans or things that you've got to plant months before they're going to come to market. But what if we were thinking about coffee shops? I bet if we called up the CEO of Café de Leche on York and 50th or Highland Park Cafe right next door, and we asked them, do you decide how much coffee to brew each morning, right? You decide your output and then charge whatever price you can get? They would think we were crazy. Of course they don't decide how much coffee to make. They're going to make coffee depending on the number of people who show up trying to buy it. On a day that they've got lots of demand, they'll make a lot of coffee. On days that they've got very little, they make very little coffee. Instead, what they decide to do is they decide what price to charge for their coffee. Likewise for restaurants. No restaurant decides ahead of time, how many meals will I serve today? Instead, they decide what prices do I put on the menu, then they make whatever meals people order. Same thing if we thought about gas stations, right? Each gas station has a lake of gasoline underneath their filling stations, and they can call up the truck to get more gasoline anytime they're running low. So they don't think, oh, how much gasoline am I going to sell, and then figure out the price that'll get rid of all their gasoline. They decide what price to charge, and then serve as many cars as show up at that price. So we're going to call this alternative view of oligopoly, where firms choose their prices and then sell as much output as they can, Bertrand oligopoly. So just like in Cournot oligopoly, we're going to have multiple firms with identical output. But now, instead of deciding how much to make, each firm decides the price. And then sells as much as they can at that price. Great. Now, one other thing we'll add is because these firms are producing identical output, we'll assume that consumers are going to buy from whichever firm is offering the lowest price, and we'll split the market 50-50 when firms offer the same price. Consumers buy from the lowest price firm. Wonderful. Okay. So just like we did for Cournot oligopoly, let's think through this with a concrete example. So if you wanted to get on Highway 134 off of York Boulevard, you'd pass these two gas stations that are right across the street from each other, an Arco and a Unico. So let's imagine that, as we talked about here, nobody cares whether they're buying gas from the Arco or the Unico, right? No one's concerned about having to make a left turn or anything like that. And let's imagine that Arco and Unico decide every morning what price to put up on their sign, and then sell as much gas as they can to whoever will come at that price. So they're not deciding ahead of time how much gas to sell, they're deciding ahead of time what price to charge. On top of this, let's imagine that Arco and Unico have different suppliers, and let's say that Unico has a little bit cheaper gas than Arco does. So for Unico, there's a constant marginal cost equal to $3. And for Arco, there's a constant marginal cost equal to 350. Let's also say we've got demand for gas at this intersection given by QD of P. It's going to equal 100 minus 10P. And again, demanders don't care at all who they buy from, so they'll buy from whoever has the lowest price. If the two firms charge the same amount, then they'll split the total output. Great. So just like we did for Cournot oligopoly, let's start by thinking about how we'd solve this problem, how we'd figure out each firm's best decision, best response functions, if we had just a discrete set of options. And then we'll think about how to take the logic from our discrete problem and use it to figure out what they'll do when they can charge any price that they want. So let's imagine we've got only 3 prices to worry about. We could imagine either that the market's going to settle at Unico's marginal cost, right, at Arco's marginal cost, or above both of their marginal costs. And I'll just pick something at random and say that would be $4. So let's think about how much would get sold in each of those contexts. So at a price of $3, right, we have demand of 100 minus 30 is 70. 350, 100 minus 35 is 65. And at $4, 100 minus 40 would be 60. Great. So then we can think about our game, where each firm decides how much to charge. We've got Unico, who can charge 3, 350, or 4. And then we've got Arco, who can charge 3, 350, or 4. Great. So we just need to figure out their payoffs. Then our best response functions, and that should get us to a Nash equilibrium. Wonderful. So if they both charge $3, then Unico would be making no money on each unit, so they would get a profit of nothing. Arco would actually be losing 50 cents on each unit. So in total, 70 units would be sold, right? Arco would get 35 of those units, so half of 50 cents in negative profits, which would be, let's see, negative 17.50. No good for them. If Arco charged $3.50 and Unico charged $3, Unico would get the whole market to themselves. Arco would sell nothing. If Unico charged $3 and Arco charged $4, same deal, right? Unico gets nothing because they're charging at cost. Arco gets nothing because they're not making any sales. How about if Unico charged $3.50? Well, then they get nothing if they were the low price. If they were not the low price, right? If Arco charged $3, Arco, of course, would lose a ton of money, right? They'd lose half of all their sales, half of 70, so negative $35. No good. If they matched, right, if they both charged $35, they would split the market evenly. Arco would make nothing because they would be charging at their marginal cost, whereas Unico would be making 50 cents off of each of their sales, off of each of their $22.50 in sales. I'm sorry, $32.50 in sales, which means that they would be making $17.25. And if Arco charged $4, then they would get no sales. Unico would get all of the sales, making 50 cents on each unit, so they would get $65. And finally, what if Unico charged $4? Well, in that case, if Arco charged 3, they'd still be losing a ton of money. Unico would get nothing. If Arco was the low price at $3.50, then Unico would get nothing and Arco would get nothing. In this case, because they'd be making all of the sales, but not making any money off of any of them. And finally, if they both decided to charge $4, then they would split the sales evenly. They would make $60 in total sales, so they would get 30 sales each. Unico would make $1 off of each of those sales, so it would make $30 in profit. Arco would make 50 cents on each, so they would make $15 in profit. Wonderful. Okay, so these are our payoffs. So now we want to know, what's each firm's best response to each of the other firm's potential actions? So let's think about Arco's best response first. If we knew that Unico was going to charge $3, then Arco's best response is to charge $3.50 or $4, right? They're not going to want to be the low price there. So either of these are the best response. How about if Unico charged $3.50? Again, they'll either want to charge $3.50 or they'll want to charge $4. Lastly, what if Unico charged $4? Then they would want to charge $4. Great. How about Unico's best response to Arco? Well, if Arco charged $3, doesn't really matter, they could do anything. And they're not going to make any money. Arco charged $3.50, they're clearly going to want to match their price. And if Arco charged $4, they would also want to charge $3.50. So, what are our Nash equilibria? Well, there's only two, right? One is going to be when Arco charges $3.50 and Unico charges $3.50. The other is where Unico also charges $3.50, but Arco charges a price above $3.50 and doesn't get any of the market. So, what are we going to conclude from this? We're going to conclude that regardless of which of these two Nash equilibria take place, it seems like the market's going to end up somewhere close to Arco's marginal cost, right? It's not going to go much above that because even though both firms would make money if they charge the higher price, neither firm has an incentive to be outbid by their competitor when they're charging a price above their marginal cost. On the other hand, they're not going to drop too much below Arco's marginal cost because Unico wants to make more money, right? So this is kind of the logic suggested by this problem. So let's think about how to take this logic and solve for this mathematically when we allow Unico and Arco to pick any price that they want, rather than forcing them to pick one of these three prices. So how are we going to do this? How are we going to try to figure out the Nash equilibrium outcome when Arco and Unico can choose any prices that they want? Well, we'll do the same thing that we did in the Cornell oligopoly case. In other words, we'll think about each firm's best response to the decision made by each other firm, which is exactly the same thing we did, right, when we said when Unico charges $3, Arco should charge 3.5 or 4. When Unico charges $3.50, Arco should charge 3.5 or 4. When Unico charges 4, Arco should charge 15. We're going to do this exact same process, except we're going to consider any price Unico could charge, PU, and we'll think about as an option for Arco, any price Arco could charge, PA. So our goal, right, is going to be best response function PA as a function of PU. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, first of all, let's think about Arco's goal, which is to maximize their profit, right? So how much profit will Arco make as a function of their price and their competitor's price? Well, their profit is just going to be PA times Q. Minus their marginal cost times Q. Right? Or, if you prefer, which I do, we could think of this as their price minus their marginal cost times however much they'll sell. Great. So then the only question is, how much will they sell as a consequence of their price and their competitor's price? And this demand curve, which is essentially what we're looking for, is going to be just the same as the demand curves we worked out when we were thinking about mist and breeze. Effectively, we can think about this as there only being three relevant cases. Either the price that Unico is charging is higher than Arco's price, it's the same as Arco's price, or it's lower than Arco's price. So what would happen if PU was greater than PA? Well, in that case, right, everyone would buy from Arco, no one would buy from Unico, so QA would equal 100 minus 10 times PA. Right? How about if the two prices were equal? Well, in that case, the two firms would split the total output, right? So we would say that QA would have to equal 1/2 times 100 minus 10 PA. And lastly, what would happen if PU was less than PA? PU less than PA. Well, in that case, Arco wouldn't sell anything. Great. So putting these two things together, we can come up with a pretty simple rule for how Arco ought to set PA. If they would make money selling at any price below PU, right? In other words, if the PU is greater than their marginal cost, they're clearly not going to want to set a price greater than PU, right? Or they'll not sell anything. And for that matter, they're also not going to want to set a price equal to PU, right? Because they could lower their price by a penny and double the amount that they're going to sell. So what we can say is their optimal PA as a function of PU has to be the following. If PU is higher than marginal cost, they're going to want to be below PU. How much below PU? Well, they're going to want to set the price as high as they can, or as close to their monopolist profit maximizing price as they can. Right? So as long as these prices are reasonably close to each other, we can simplify this by saying, right, if PU is greater than marginal cost A, then they're going to want to charge PU minus, let's say, a penny. On the other hand, if PU is less than or equal to the marginal cost of A, then they're not going to get any benefit from lowering their price below PU, right? So why don't we just say they'll set PA equal to their marginal cost, right? And not sell anything, right? Or at least sell, maybe get half of the output if PU is exactly equal to marginal cost. Wonderful. Right, so this is going to tell us for any price PU that might get set, as long as it's not so high that they're actually going to want to charge a monopolist price, we'll know that PU is going to be just below PA. PA is going to be just below PU if they could make money selling at less than PU, and they're going to sell at marginal cost if they can't. By the exact same logic, we can say that PU is optimal, right? The Unico's best response to PA is going to have to be the same thing, right? Their best move is going to be to charge a price just below PA, as long as PA is greater than their marginal cost. Right? And a price equal to marginal cost if PA is anything at or below their marginal cost. Okay. So given this, what's our Nash equilibrium going to be? Well, just like before, our Nash equilibrium is going to be the case where Arco's price is the best response to Unico's price when Unico's price is the best response to Arco's price. In other words, when neither firm has any reason to change their behavior if they know that the other firm is going to be at the equilibrium. So let's think about what this got to be. We know that Arco's marginal cost is $3.50. We know for sure that Arco's never going to charge a price below their marginal cost, or below $3.50. They'll either charge $3.50 if Unico's price is below that, or they'll charge something a little bit less than Unico's price, only if Unico's price is above that. Right? So they'll never charge a price below $3.50. So to think through what our Nash equilibrium's got to be, let's consider two possibilities. Option one is going to be that PA is greater than $3.50. And option two is PA is equal to $3.50. So if PA was greater than $3.50, what's Unico's best response, right? Let's say that PA was $3.60. Well, that would be higher than Unico's marginal cost, which is $3. So Unico would respond by charging 1 penny less than Arco. But if Unico is charging 1 penny less than Arco, and still charging more than $3.50, right, if they were charging something like $3.59, then Arco's best response to Unico would be to charge $3.58. Which means that Arco's best response to Unico is not going to be the price that Unico is responding to. We can't possibly be in a Nash equilibrium. Right? Essentially, if Arco charged anything above $3.50, the two companies would get in a bidding war, driving the price down and down and down and down. How about if Arco was charging $3.50? Well, in that case, Unico's best response would be to charge 1 penny less than Arco and get the whole market for themselves. Right? Charge $3.49. And what's Arco's best response? To $3.49? Well, $3.49 is below their marginal cost, so their best response is to charge their marginal cost. In other words, to set a price of $3.50. So what does this mean? It means that when Arco charges $3.50, Unico's best response to $3.50 is $3.49. Arco's best response to $3.49 is $3.50. So both firms' decisions are a best response to each other. Neither firm has a reason to deviate. So what's the conclusion of all this? Well, the conclusion is, when we have Bertrand competition, we'll have a couple things. First of all, the only firm that's going to produce anything is going to be the firm with the lowest marginal costs. Right? In this case, Unico is going to produce all of the output. Everyone's going to shop at Unico because they can charge the lowest cost. But the price is going to be set by the second lowest marginal cost, right? So first lowest cost firm makes everything. And the second is that second lowest firm is going to set the price. So if we compare this to Cournot competition, we're going to come to very, very different conclusions in this market structure. What we're going to see is, if we added a third gas station at this intersection with a price above $3.50, nothing whatsoever would change. The problem would be exactly the same as it is now, because if they're not the lowest cost firm or the second lowest cost firm, they're not really relevant. In addition, in Cournot competition, we expect all the firms to produce even when they have different prices or different marginal costs. In Bertrand competition, we're going to see only one firm produce, and that one firm will produce all of the output. So what this means is that Bertrand competition, in terms of pricing, is going to look much more like perfect competition than will Cournot competition. Right? Effectively, we're going to say that firms are going to produce, when firms have similar marginal costs, then a very small number of firms can drive the market down towards the competitive price. On the other hand, if we think about things like market share or any measure of monopoly, right? We ask, does one firm dominate this industry? One firm is much more likely to dominate an industry under Bertrand competition than under Cournot competition. So what we expect to see in Bertrand competition is something like what we see with Amazon, where you have a single firm with massive, massive market share whose prices are really, really low, right? Not necessarily because even though they have total market share, right, they're selling all of the, or very, very large percentage of all e-commerce, they might worry that any competitor could enter at any moment if they allowed their price to drift high enough that it would be above some potential competitor's marginal cost. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this. Congratulations on finishing your very last Econ 250 lecture. I look forward to talking to you about this soon.